Finding new ways to learn and link. As we go through this chapter, I'll be explaining the basic elements of computer technology, which include software, hardware, and networks, and describe some of the key trends in each area. I'll take a look at the reasons for the increasing popularity of cloud computing and describe how data becomes information and how decision support systems can provide high quality information that helps managers make better decisions. I'll also explain how internet based technologies have changed business to consumer and business to business commerce. And finally, I'll describe the problems posed by the rapid changes in internet based technologies and give just a brief explanation with ways that these problems can be addressed. As we start looking at computers and technology, we have to distinguish between hardware and software. Hardware is the physical components that are used to collect, input, store, and process data, and it's also used to display and distribute information. Software is programs that provide the instructions to a computer so that it can perform a desired task. Software includes the Microsoft Office suite, which has PowerPoint, Excel, Word. Those are examples of software. System software performs critical functions that are necessary to operate a computer at the most basic level. So that would be your Windows program or your basic Apple program. And then we have application software. And this is software that helps users perform a specific task. And these are organized into two different groups. We have horizontal applications within the software and then vertical applications of the software. As time progresses, As time progresses, computer-based technologies, they are becoming smaller, simpler, and most importantly, they're becoming faster. We had the first phase of the internet, which is where networks consisting of different groups. Well, think of a network as a group, and it's where these groups would operate under a common set of rules or protocols to communicate with each other. One example that we see a lot is broadband internet connection between Comcast and Dish and other computers. And with these types of systems, we have the capacity to transmit large amounts of data very, very quickly. And as technology continues to evolve, consumers and businesses are demanding that information be transmitted across the computer lines, the fiber optics, much, much faster. Internet 2, this is the new generation of internet technology, and it is based on using fiber optic cable. It is a non-commercial network, and it uses high-speed connectivity to improve education, research, and collaboration. Then we have the intranet. And an intranet is a private network that makes documents accessible to employees of a single firm. For example, when I worked for ConAgra Foods, we had an intranet system that we would use to communicate trade promotions. We would use it to communicate financial information that we only needed inside the company. That's an intranet. It's only for a specific group of people. And then there's the extranet, and it is similar to the intranet, but it allows certain access to particular clients that are outside of the firm. For example, Walmart would have access to ConAgra's supply chain information so that they could be ordering their products in a seamless fashion. So that's an example of when you would be using and seeing an extranet. Now, the role of the IT department, it varies based on every single company. So in some companies, the IT department implements key decisions about which technologies the firm will use, and the IT department decides the visibility levels. So an administrative assistant might not have as much accessibility to information as an upper level manager. The other role of an IT department is that they maintain an organization's information resources and provide technical support to employees. MIWA has an IT department that falls in this category, where if our students or if our teachers are having problems, we go to our tech department for support. But our IT department is not making decisions about the specific technologies that MIWA is going to use. Now, cloud computing is fairly new, and right now it appears that the sky's the limit. The beauty of the cloud is that it supplements or replaces internally owned computer resources, and it uses internet-based storage capacity, processing power, and computer applications. And it's phenomenal because it can keep this storage somewhere in tech land, which is why we call it the cloud, and it minimizes the amount of capital that a company needs to make. The cloud also gives companies access to a wide range of resources fairly cheaply, whereas in the old days, to have access to new technologies, it was a very expensive proposition, and the cloud has helped to bring those prices down. And that is fabulous for consumers and for businesses. Now, with the cloud, it eliminates the problem of excess capacity. That would have been a problem if you were in the old days when you were buying a system that really was more powerful than what you needed. So you would end up spending lots of money on resources and not utilizing it the way you needed to. The cloud allows a lot of collaboration among employees and business partners. We see that at MIWA when we have our Google Docs and we share it with other classmates and we collaborate and work with each other. Businesses also use this technology. And the cloud also helps with parallel computing. So this is when there's data processing and you've got two systems going, and it makes it very, very nice. Now, how is data used and why is it important? So with data, what happens is we have these raw pieces of information, lots and lots of numbers that firms collect. And once this information is put into a meaningful format, your key decision makers are able to sit down and make business decisions that not only affect day-to-day operations, but where do they want the company to be in the future. So the cloud helps this information to be processed from raw data, which is typically raw numbers, there's your math, and takes those sheets of numbers and puts them into charts and graphs and makes it relevant to what your business is trying to look for. Now, a database, this is a file of related data that's organized according to a particular system, and it's stored in a computer accessible storage media such as the cloud. Sometimes it can be stored on an intranet, but this is all um, a place, it's a way to hold on to information that the company may need in the future. Now, what are some characteristics of good data? It has to be accurate. If it's not accurate, then it's meaningless. It has to be relevant to what the decision makers are analyzing. If you are an accountant, you're going to be looking at your profitability numbers and how much you spent versus you might not be looking at market share. Which is more of a marketing company's or marketing department's idea. So is it relevant to what you're doing, and is the information relevant to your business? It has to be timely. If you are just getting data from a year ago and trying to make a decision for today, that's outdated. Your situation has changed. So it must be on time. It has to be understandable. And finally, it has to be secure. A lot of this information is very um, proprietary for companies, and you do not want your competitors to get a hold of it. Quaker Oats does not want Kellogg's to have their marketing plan or their profitability numbers. So it has to be very, very secure. Now, information technology, ideally it is used to improve decision making. By giving managers access to these large amounts of data, and with the power of a processing center, it's able to convert this into high quality information very quickly and very efficiently. And this is different. When I started my career in sales and marketing, we received, I kid you not, I would get a foot of paper every couple of weeks that gave me market information from 2 months ago. Well, by the time I got it, if I even had time to create a report on any of the information, it was old news. So technology gives us the ability to take that relevant information and make decisions quickly. And under business intelligence systems, the use of this technology, it gives us a chance to discover subtle and complex relationships that are hidden in the data. Sometimes we don't see how project A is impacting project B. But with the use of data, we can start to see the cause and effect relationships that govern the activities that our firm needs to be taking. We also have a data warehouse. So this is where large organization-wide databases are used, and they provide a centralized location for storing the data. And this data can come both internally from the organization's own databases and also externally. So you have market information that you need to incorporate into your decision-making process. You have data mining. This is where you use very powerful statistical and mathematical techniques to analyze large amounts of data to identify useful information that maybe you hadn't seen before. And finally, the information technology can be used to improve a manager's decision-making process. You want to be driving your company based on educated facts and not emotion. And this is a way that you can support that action. Now, with e-commerce, this is such an amazing phenomenon that has really taken off over the last 10 years. So it's, in terms of business, it's a very new sort of way of approaching your business. It's the way that we have business to consumer, or B2C e-commerce. That's where businesses and final consumers, where they interact, and they do this over a network or an internet. And finally, we have business to business, or B2B e-commerce. And that's where businesses buy from and sell to other businesses. And again, this is done over a network or an internet. Now, this whole chart, I'm not going to read it, but some of the highlights: types of customers under business to consumer. We are typically thinking about the final consumer, and there's a large number. If we look at the United States, every person in the country has the opportunity to be an individual final consumer. There's usually fairly small transactions, and consumers might do some research, but a lot of their purchases are based on impulse, and there's typically very little negotiation, and the firm will want to develop loyalty for consumers, and sometimes that can be a little bit challenging. I guess I am reading this whole chart. So, off to the other half. When we are dealing with other businesses, typically when it's business to business, you're only working with a few large customers. You're not dealing with every little consumer. An example might be the grocery industry, where you have, from ConAgra's standpoint, you're working with Walmart, you're working with Kroger, you're working with Safeway. You're not working with the consumers that are in Safeway or the consumers that are in Fred Meyer. You're looking at big groups of businesses. The dollars that you're dealing with are very, very large, and typically in the millions. I wouldn't even stop at thousands. It's millions. Typically, businesses are using different research models, and they're comparing vendors. They might take bids. They're looking at trends within categories and what is new and upcoming. There's usually some pretty extensive negotiation that goes on, and these negotiations can cover everything from price to delivery, installing hardware that might be needed at a store level, for example, other support, and maybe you're developing a special program for that customer. So there's lots of very complex negotiations. And typically the buyers and sellers develop very deep and very close, long-lasting relationships, and it allows them to coordinate all of their activities. So this is not a one-off where you're making a one-time purchase, but where you're going to have repeat business. So you're very aware of how you're treating each other. Now, on the Web 2.0, this is interactive and collaborative e-commerce with customers, and it is built to forge stronger relationships between the parties. It creates a richer, more interesting, and useful experience. So when you're buying on the web, it needs to be fun and exciting. If it's not, then, oh, forget it. I'm going to go someplace else. It also needs to encourage collaboration. So where people are working together. And Enterprise 2.0, it uses uh, the Web 2.0 with technologies within organizations. Now, advertising on the internet, we have the business to consumer companies that have large target markets. If you look on, I'm thinking of Facebook right now, and over on the right hand side, you've got all these companies that are always trying to grab your attention. There's the use of opt-in email as an advertising medium. So if you're shopping, and more frequently I'm asked for my email address, as I'm sure you're asked too. So opt-in email is where you as the receiver are agreeing to receive marketing emails from a company. Companies love this because it's inexpensive. They can communicate a promotion to the consumer through the internet, and it costs them next to nothing. So it's highly effective from a revenue or expense standpoint. Whereas if you mailed a coupon or mailed a brochure to the consumer, that's very expensive. Junk mail. Then we have viral marketing, and that is getting to customers to communicate a firm's message to friends, family, and colleagues. And we hear all the time about different YouTube videos going viral. Well, customers or businesses love when their product has gone viral. That is a huge kudo. And you see on the screen below, we've got Lay's and Lay's potato chips with a kitty cat and a YouTube video that everyone was checking out because it was pretty clever. That is gold. That is absolute gold to a company. Going viral, it can increase consumer awareness of a product. And another way to go viral, which I already referred to, is using social media. Now, this has been pretty cool for companies where technology allows them to handle payments electronically rather than mailing checks back and forth. So typically transactions are made over some sort of a secure network, and you've got to be super careful with doing this. We use Cybermediary, which is an internet-based company that specializes in the secure electronic transfer of funds. And then you have electronic bill presentment and payment, and that's where bills are sent directly to a customer's email rather than to their mailbox. And this saves companies tons and tons of money. And likewise, consumers can pay their bills online rather than spending money on envelopes, spending money on checks, and spending money on postage. That all adds to the operating expenses of a firm, and of course a firm wants to minimize those. Now, information technology in the business to business market, these transactions result in a long-term supply chain relationship. And supply chain is where we're looking at how a product goes from raw goods all the way up to the end product. And for this reason, it's really important that tight and efficient relationships are forged between companies because it can give companies a competitive edge. If you're in tight with if two companies have a strong relationship, they can really drive a brand and drive a technology, and it gives them a competitive advantage. Now, e-marketplaces provide a platform for business-to-business markets to interact, and it helps them to reduce time, effort, and cost of doing business for both parties, both the sellers and the buyers. And it also gives the opportunity for smaller firms to be able to afford to participate, as connections between firms are not, they're not necessarily required. And by connections, this can be, uh, when I worked for ConAgra, we had some really small clients that, if as a salesperson you only have a certain amount of time, are you going to go to the headquarters of Safeway, or are you going to go to the Thriftway chain? You're going to go spend your time and energy at Safeway. And so the Thriftway customer maybe wasn't benefiting as much. Technology allows those gaps to be minimized, and it helps to level out the playing field. Now, some of the benefits that are presented by e-marketplaces are: it's easy to contact and negotiate, which can lead to a best fit. You can also have some other services that are provided. For example, it can help to reduce the amount of time, effort, and cost involved in doing business for both buyers and sellers. You also have a possibility of using something called radio frequency identification, and this improves the efficiency of supply chains. So you have information that is used throughout the process that helps to track how goods are moved from raw materials to the end product, so that if, worst case scenario, frequently we hear about recalls of child seats, for example, baby seats for cars. Well, all of these raw materials are given a specific identification number, and in the case of a recall, a company can use that information to identify where those products were sent, as in which markets, and then they're able to blitz the market with a media campaign to get the product back. And we see that with Chipotle, and as they've had some problems in their supply chain, and they could track, as they've been dealing with their supply chain issues, they can identify which products caused the illnesses in their stores or restaurants, and where they needed to go back to try to fix that. So that's kind of a cool thing. Now, some threats in the internet and IT, and these are this is quite a growing industry. So as a result of rapid technological developments, there's a number of security concerns, annoyances, as well as legal and ethical issues. And some of the threats in the internet and IT include malware, spyware, computer viruses, and worms. So malware is software that's created and distributed with just a malicious or mean purpose. There's no other reason for it to exist other than to just cause havoc. You have spyware that tracks what's happening on a particular computer, and it's put on there without permission. You have computer viruses that also install themselves on computers without the user's knowledge, and they spread by attaching to other files that are transferred between computers. And then finally you have worms, and these are independent programs that can spread across computer networks without being attached to other files. So how do you protect your system? So within an organization, all employees need to be doing regular backups of their laptops, backups of their internets, backups of the intranet. It's important to stay on top of high quality antivirus software. if you need to update your operating system regularly. It's important not to open unknown email messages and to not download files from illegitimate websites. And the authors of some of these, they're very tricky, so you have to be very, very careful. Now, with spam, phishing, and farming, spam is, it's so annoying. So spam clogs email inboxes, making it a tough task for people to find legitimate messages. And they are sent to a lot of people whether they're interested in the product or not. Phishing is another way in which spam is used, where it sends messages to legitimate businesses like credit card companies, banks, or retailers. Those are all examples. And they are trying to get your attention. And they're just sending it out, sort of like those phone calls that people sometimes get at home at night from different companies. And finally, you have farming. Farming uses fake websites that trick people to divulge personal or financial information. And that's super scary and something that, at least as a consumer, you always need to be aware of that. But companies are also at risk, because if they inadvertently give out their company's financial accounts at their banks, they're really putting themselves at risk. Now, hackers intend to cause harm, and these are people who work really hard to gain access to a computer. There's a particular type of hacker that's called a black hacker. And these hackers attempt to disrupt businesses or break into computer systems to steal identities. And they're probably the worst kind. So how do you protect yourself? You install a firewall. And a firewall uses hardware or software that creates a barrier to prevent hackers from getting into the system. Firewalls have become pretty commonplace, and they continue, if you're a good computer person, you almost have job security, because as our society becomes more computer based, hackers, that's a growing business. So protecting companies and individuals from hackers is also becoming a growing business. Now, some of the ethical and legal issues surrounding technology is your personal privacy and how that has eroded by the tracking that is done on the computers. So when you make a purchase from, let's say, Land's End online, well, they start tracking some of that. How about your intellectual property? So products that result from creative and intellectual efforts. If you are not careful about protecting what you yourself have created, it's very easy for that to get out there, and suddenly something that you've created, it's going viral, and you no longer are receiving the credit or possibly the revenue for it. So we have piracy of intellectual property, and this is really big in the corporate world, and that is reproducing and distributing copyrighted work without obtaining permission from the owner. The United States is constantly challenging China because the Chinese are notorious for taking a product and figuring out how it works and copying it and then distributing it under a different brand name. And in the United States, we would consider that stealing intellectual property, but for the Chinese, it's just another day in business. So there's lots of ethical and legal issues, especially when you consider different cultures and different norms around our global economy. All right, now looking back, I've explained the basic elements of computer technology, which includes hardware, software, and networks, and I've described some of the key trends in each area. I've discussed the reasons for the increasing popularity of cloud computing, in addition to describing how data becomes information and how really important decisions can be made when you have high quality information that is given to managers and upper management. I've also explained how the internet based technologies have changed some of the business to consumer and business to business commerce. And finally, I've described some of the problems that are posed by rapid changes in internet based technologies and some of the ways to address these problems. So this ends chapter 16. We're getting very close to being done with this class. Please get prepared not only for the chapter 16 quiz, but the course final is coming up soon, and that will be over chapters 12 through 17. And there's also a final paper that is due, which has to do with a career in business. So after having studied all of the different areas in business that we've just taken a tiny little look into, I would like you to pick your favorite topic and tell me why you would be interested in pursuing a degree in that topic. And that will be due during the last week of class. As usual, if you have questions, please give me a call. And you guys are doing great. I'm just very pleased with how you're doing in the class. Thank you so much and have a great day.